3 notes. So we're going to continue graphing quadratic functions, but this time we're going to be in standard form. None of the process will change, but it's just going to look a little different in how our equation appears. So we need to graph y equals 2x squared plus 8x minus 1. So in my calculator, I'm going to start off by pushing the y equals button, which is the top left button. And if there's anything left in there, I'm going to clear it out. And I want to type in 2x is right next to my green button. And then my x squared button is going to put that tiny 2 that I need. So now that I have that in, I'm going to put plus 8. And then I put my x again, which is right next to that green button. And then I want to press minus, make sure you're using the minus and not the negative, 1. So it's helpful to start off by just looking at your graph, just to see what your graph will look like. So if you hit that top right button that says graph, it will bring you to, and mine might look a little different, it'll bring you to what your graph should look like. And let me get mine to be a 10 by 10. That's kind of similar to what yours should look like on your calculator. So yours should look like this on your calculator. And what we really want is that table. So if you go and you hit second, so your blue button, and hit the graph button, it will bring you to your table. Now, you can scroll up and down on this table, but we want the points that can fit on a 10 by 10. I cannot graph negative 623. I can graph negative 5, 9. So I'm going to graph that. Negative 5, positive 9. And I can graph negative 4, negative 1. Negative 3, negative 7. Negative 2, negative 9, negative 1, negative 7, 0, negative 1, and 1, 9. So once you have all of those points plotted, you can connect your dots as best as you can. I know it's not the easiest thing to do, but as long as you have something that looks like a U shape, that's perfect. So now that we have that, we can say that our graph opens up, and then we need to find our vertex. Remember, our vertex is always the highest or the lowest point of our graph, which happens to be this point down here, which was the point negative 2, negative 9. And you can see that also on our table. So that was the point negative 2, negative 9. Okay, then we need to say our y-intercept. So our y-intercept is crossing on our y-axis, which is right here at the point 0, negative 1. Okay, the x-intercepts are crossing. They're super hard to see, so we're going to talk about that in class today. So don't worry about that one. We're going to leave that one blank. You won't see something like that on your test, so I wouldn't stress over it. Okay, then we need to find our axis of symmetry. That is the line that cuts straight through our vertex vertically. So if we draw our vertical line straight through our vertex, and we have to name that axis of symmetry. So that would be x equals, and that cut through negative 2 on the x-axis. So x equals negative 2 is our axis of symmetry. Okay, then we need to do our domain and range. So for domain, I'm going to go up and down until I hit my graph. And so the first thing I hit is an arrow. So that means I'm going to negative infinity. And the last thing that I hit when I continue to go up and down is also an arrow. So that means I'm going to positive infinity. Okay, then if I look at my range, I'm going to go back and forth, and the first thing I hit is a dot down here at -9. So since I was touching a point, it's going to be a bracket at -9. And then if I continue to go back and forth, the last thing I hit is up here at arrows, which means I'm going to infinity. And I use parentheses whenever I put an infinity. Okay, let's do another example. Example 2. Now we need to graph y equals x squared plus 6x plus 5. So I'm going to go back to y equals, and I'm going to clear out my old equation. And I'm going to type x squared plus 6x plus 5. Once I have that typed in, I'm going to look at my graph just to see what it should look like. But on your calculator, you really want to go to the table. So we're going to hit second graph. Ooh, mine took me super far up. I want to go back to around that 0 area because I want points that I can plot on this 10 by 10. And it looks like the first one we can graph is -6, +5. So -6, +5, -5, 0, -4, -3, -3, -4, -2, -3, 0, -1, 0, and then 0, 5. And then we have all the points that we can plot, so we're going to connect our dots. And we can still say that our graph is opening up. And then our vertex is down here, our very lowest point of our graph, which was -3, -4. Okay. Then we need our y-intercept. Our y-intercept was right here where we're crossing that y-axis. So that's the point 0, 5. Okay, and it looks like we have some nice x-intercepts also. So we're crossing that x-axis in 2 spots. Now, if you ever get confused on what these points are, you can always look back to your table at the points that you plotted. And so it looks like the first one we crossed at -5, so that was the point -5, comma 0. And then we crossed again at -1, and so that was the point -1, 0. Okay, axis of symmetry. We want to draw that vertical line straight through our vertex. And since it's a vertical line, we're going to say x equals, and whatever number we cross through. So it looks like we crossed through at -3. Okay, then we need to do domain and range. So I'm going to go up and down for domain. And the first thing I touch is up here at the arrow. So that means I'm going from -infinity with the parentheses. And then I'm going to keep going. And the last thing I touch is up here at an arrow again. So I'm going to positive infinity. It's going in both directions forever and ever. For range, I'm going to go back and forth. And the first time I touch my graph is down here at -4. And since I was touching a point, I'm going to use a bracket. Then I'm going to keep going. And the last thing that I touch is up here at arrows. So that means I'm going to positive infinity. And that would be with a bracket. All right, let's do another example. Now we're going to graph y equals -x squared plus 8x minus 7. So be careful. Let's go to our y equals on our calculator. And let's clear out that old equation. And we have to be very careful on how we type this because it says negative, so make sure you're using a negative, x squared plus 8x minus, so we're switching to a minus now, 7. So we had a negative and then a minus. So let's look what our graph should look like. And it looks like we flipped upside down, which we remember from that first section that we did, that whenever there's a negative out front, that means that our graph is going to open down. So if we go to our table by hitting second graph, we're going to get some points. So it looks like the first one I can plot is 0, -7. Everything else is way too big. Okay, then I can plot 1, 0, 2, 5, 3, 8, 4, 9. This one has a lot of points. 5, 8, 6, 5, 7, 0, and 8, -7. So a lot of points on that one that we can fit. So once you have them, connect your dots to make that lovely U shape. And we just said that we were opening down. So a little different than the ones we've been doing. Okay, so on this one, our vertex is now at the very top. It's the maximum point. So it's up here at the very highest point. Since we're opening down, it's the top. And that was the point 4, 9. So our vertex is 4, 9. Okay, then we need our y-intercept. So it looks like our y-intercept, we were crossing down here at the point 0, -7. Just to make sure, let's look at our table. 0, -7. Okay, then we need our x-intercepts. So it looks like we're crossing that x-axis in 2 spots. The first one being right here at +1. So check on your table. That point was 1, 0. And then it looks like we're crossing again right here at 7. So that was the point 7, 0. Okay, then we need to make our axis of symmetry. So that's the vertical line that goes straight through our vertex. And whenever we say our axis of symmetry, we have to say x equals, and it looks like we cut through +4 on this one. Okay, now let's do our domain and range. So for our domain, I'm gonna go up and down. And the first time I hit is down here at an arrow, so that means it's going forever and ever to the -infinity. And then if we keep going, the last thing I hit is another arrow, so that means I'm going to +infinity. Okay, range, I'm going to start in the negatives, and the very first thing I hit is arrows, so that means it's going down to -infinity forever and ever. But then if we keep going, the last thing we hit is a point up here at +9. So I'm going to end at +9, and it was a point, so I'm going to put a bracket. Alrighty, one more example. We're going to graph -2x squared plus 4x plus 8. So let's go to the y equals on our calculator, clear out that old stuff, and let's type in -2x squared plus 4x plus 8. Oops, I got an extra 8. Okay, now let's look at the graph. And again, we knew that it was going to be opening down because of that negative out front. So let's get some points and go to our table, second graph. And it looks like the first one that I can fit is -2, -8. Then I can graph -1, +2, 0, 8. And then I can graph 1, 10, 2, 8, 3, 2, and 4, -8. So once you have all of those, connect your dots. And we can tell right off the bat that we already said it's opening down. So that means that we have a vertex up here at the very top. It's the highest point, meaning it's the maximum of our graph. And that was the point 1, 10. And you can double check that on your table as well. 1, 10 was our vertex. Okay, then our y-intercept. We were crossing that y-axis up here at +8, and that was the point 0, 8. Okay, again, if you look for your x-intercepts, we are crossing at 2 spots, but they are not perfect. So we're going to skip over that, and we're going to talk about that in class. So leave that one blank for now. My calculator doesn't do it on the iPad. Okay, then we're going to talk about that axis of symmetry. So we need to make a vertical line straight through our vertex. And whenever we name that, we say x equals, and it looks like we cut through x equals +1. Okay, for domain, we're going to go up and down, and the first thing I hit is an arrow, so that means I'm going to -infinity. And then the last thing I hit is another arrow, which means I'm going to +infinity. Okay, then with range, I start down here in my negatives, and the very first thing I hit is arrows. So I'm going from -infinity, and then I go up my graph, and the last thing I hit is a point up there at +10. So since it was a point, I'm going to use a bracket at +10.